Hello, welcome to Storytime in the Elementary School Library, the first of 3 online sessions hosted by QSLiN this year on the theme of joy in the library. My name is Rafaela Dixon. I'm the school board librarian at the Lester B. Pearson School Board, and I'm a member of the QSLiN PD committee. I would like to acknowledge that while we're all joining this session from different areas across the province of Quebec, the land that I am on is located on the unceded territory of the Ganegahaga people. I'd like to start with a few words about the importance of storytime. We all know that storytime is important. I know I don't have to convince you, but I do think it is helpful to be able to articulate its benefits and to be intentional and open about what we're doing and why. So here are 4 main benefits of storytime. They're not the only ones. There are many benefits, but I had to limit myself to 4. So we've also put these on an infographic that we are going to share with you on our new QSLiN website at the end of the session. The first thing I'd like to talk about that is a benefit of storytime is that it develops literacy skills. So this is both early literacy skills and ongoing ones. So some examples of this would be just basic book awareness. What is a book? How do we use a book? What is the title? Who is the author? What are the parts of the book? As well, storytime helps develop print awareness. And this is one of the early literacy skills. So through stories that have rhyming, repetition, alliteration, storytime enhances letter knowledge, phonemic awareness, and phonics. So in other words, this is the correspondence between letters and their sounds, and this is a prerequisite to reading and writing. As we read aloud, we model fluency, which is the ability to read with ease and accuracy so that you can focus on the meaning of the text. And of course, story time expands vocabulary by exposing students to new words and phrases, and helps with comprehension by providing a context and discussions about what the text means. The second benefit I'd like to talk about is that storytime stimulates thinking and creativity. And this one is pretty obvious. We all know this. Storytime sparks imagination. It transports students to different worlds, allowing them to imagine characters, settings, and events. And it encourages them to create their own stories, words, and characters. It fosters curiosity and a desire to learn by introducing students to people, places, and ideas that are new to them, and to look at things that they already know. I would like to take a moment right now just to request that everybody turns off their microphone because we are having some background sounds coming through. Another important thing about storytime that is under this same subject is that it encourages critical thinking and problem solving. So when we're talking about critical thinking, asking questions is really the foundation of it. And stories encourage students to ask what is happening and why, to evaluate the information in the story, to make predictions about what may happen later on in the story, and to draw conclusions. And sometimes maybe to reevaluate those conclusions that we have drawn. So I know you all have a few stories that you like to tell that have that unexpected surprise ending that is often quite humorous. But it's more than humorous, it is actually a teachable moment about critical thinking. The third benefit that I want to talk about is my favorite. It's about building social and emotional connections. And I'm sure that we're all aware of this. When we do something regularly with our students that is joyful and engaging and meaningful, we're building relationships with them and we're fostering a sense of community and belonging. Sharing stories develops empathy and understanding of others as we learn about what the characters' lives are like. And then we have that emotional response to those stories. And of course, storytime provides many opportunities for very rich social interactions and discussions. And the final benefit of storytime that I want to bring up is that it promotes a reading culture. So I'm going to talk about what a reading culture is, and it's going to sound very familiar to you. A reading culture is an environment where reading is valued, where it is celebrated and encouraged. It's a place where people see reading as important and enjoyable, and where there are opportunities for everyone to engage with books and story. So basically, this is what a library is. Storytime is that magical experience that fosters a love of reading, encourages lifelong learning, and inspires future readers and writers. So for today's session, we have 3 speakers who are going to share their strategies that will help you elevate your own storytime sessions to the next level. First will be Sarah Da Silva Marquez, who will speak about Storytime Animation. We're then going to have a 5-minute break, followed by Chelsea Baker, who will share her story time favorite titles and her criteria for selecting books. Then Jennifer Davies will do a storytime demonstration using the book Carson Crosses Canada by Linda Bailey. And finally, we're going to end with an open discussion led by Erin Miller. And this is going to be your time to share your experiences and insights. So I would now like to introduce Sarah Da Silva Marquez from the English Montreal School Board to speak about Storytime Animation. Sarah?
So if you didn't read the blurb about me, I've worked both as a librarian and a doc tech in both high school and elementary, and I have a background in fine arts, where I did weird performance art, and I'm going to be sharing some of what I learned there and how I brought it into story time. So let's get started, shall we? First, I'm going to share with you my top 5 storytime rules. Number 1. Read the book beforehand, because I'll get into that in a little bit. Number 2, book pages should always face the students. 3, create an interactive experience. 4, be a performer. 5, be prepared to make mistakes. So first off, read the book beforehand. It prevents surprises. I've seen a storyteller be surprised that the book had ended, and it kind of created an awkward situation with them and the students. Practice reading the book aloud, because sometimes a book looks great on the page, but when actually doing story time, it is a dud. And then question or interrogate the book, your choice. So, is the font easy to read? Because sometimes you'll have beautiful pictures, lovely words, but you cannot see it when you're holding it up to the for story time. Or God forbid they use italics. How long does it take to read? So I usually like to set myself a timer, and I leave the library door open, so then I'll get interrupted because I'll make a more realistic reading experience. So if 1 week I have a story that's a bit longer than usual, and it cuts into their library time, the next week I'm going to choose a much shorter story to make up for the difference. So don't do long story, long story, long story, short story, because that's not going to work. How does it flow from your mouth? Does it flow well? Or do you find yourself like pausing and relooking and like it doesn't feel right, the words on your tongue? Maybe not choose that book. Will students enjoy or be interested in this story? Because sometimes, from an educational perspective, this story is fantastic. But from the perspective of students, it is like watching paint dry. So you gotta add some candy to the vegetables. How can you make this an interactive experience for students? We'll get into that a bit later. And what can you do with this book as a performer? And you don't know that yet because I haven't explained it yet. Well, you probably know it in your own ways. So, optional, research the book. It creates a well-rounded understanding of the book you're presenting. You might find fun facts to discuss with students. So try to find out the author's inspiration, publication history, educational uses, and if it's been challenged and or banned. So like my personal favorite, The Story of Ferdinand, it was banned from Spain for 37 years. Basically, it came out 3 months after the Spanish Civil War broke out, and Dictator Franco was not a fan. So how I'd present to the students is I would tell them, this book has been banned for 37 years from the country of Spain. At the end of the story, you'll have to figure out why it was banned. And I usually do this with grade 2 and up, but depending on your first graders, it might even work with them. And it's very interesting explaining dictatorships to children. It's fun. Next up, The Paper Bag Princess. It has been challenged and banned a lot because it's anti-family, because she chose to be single, because of the nudity and violence. And Read, A Crayon Story. has been banned repeatedly because people see it as a story about being trans, when in actuality it's inspired by the author's experience with dyslexia. So these can really help roll around your story time if you do a bit of research, but it's optional because we might not have the time. So next rule, book pages always face the students. So it's a rule of theater never to turn your back to the audience. They should be seeing what you're doing. And it creates a good connection with your students. So then for them to see the book. So you see the teddy bears are paying attention to the story, but that cute little baby is not. So don't do that. Some students will silently read along. I put silently in quotation marks because they're not so silent and they'll give away spoilers or point out when you make a mistake while reading. The only exception for this rule is if turning the book away is for dramatic storytelling purposes, then go for it. Next up, you'll want to create an interactive experience. This can be as simple as asking questions during the story. So some questions could be, what do you think is going to happen next? Why do you think the character did that? It can really open up like different perspectives on the book, and really you'll find out things that you've never even thought about the story. Does anyone know what insert food is? This is really great when it's food that's not that's may be considered ethnic, to introduce new foods and cultures. And if a student is part of that culture, they can share a bit of their culture with the class. So what does it taste like? If someone is eating this food, what does it taste like? What's in it? How many do you think you can eat? If it's a dessert, they can say 1,000,000. How do you think the character is feeling? And then a follow-up is, have any of you ever felt that way? This is great, especially for books that are about social emotional learning. And students can share about what they're nervous about or what makes them angry. And you get to learn more about your class, which is really awesome. And sometimes they'll be silent because they don't feel comfortable sharing. So I find it's great to share personal examples to help get the ball rolling. So I've actually never worked at the same school more than 1 year because I keep bouncing around, finding slots, not because I burn bridges. And I share with them like, oh, I'm usually nervous on the first day of working at a new school. And I also share like, oh, but the teachers are really nice and you guys seem all nice. So yeah, and that opens them up, and then they talk to you about how they're worried about daycare and changing up that schedule. Another ways is polling students. So in the book Worm Loves Worm, I talk to students about silly rules. Those are usually rules that are like stereotypes, like pink is for girls, blue is for boys, or superstitions or traditions. Serious rules, so rules that keep us safe, and then in between rules where we're not really sure what rule it falls under. And so whenever they get presented a new rule in the story, I ask the students, do you think who thinks it's a silly rule, an in-between rule, a serious rule? And it gets them really interested and they really think about what they're reading. Students can also join in on repetitive phrases. So like the book Going Up, that is a repetitive phrase and they love it. Students can also provide sound effects like dinosaur impressions, loud slurping, looking for hidden details on the page. The young ones are really good at this. Counting along, dancing, music optional. So for the book Diana Dances, I would turn on some music and have a little dance party whenever Diana dances. That one is a bit harder to tame down, so don't do this like the first week. And last is felt boarding. This is a snowman we did on a felt board. It is the least horrifying one I could find from the pictures I have. But it's a really awesome experience getting students involved with the story and thinking about the materials. Next up, we have be a performer. So character study, voice, facial expression, body movement, props, and costumes. So don't worry, this is not Shakespeare. It's a picture book. It doesn't have to go that in depth. It's basically asking questions about the book you're reading and using that to inform your choices as a performer. So what is their goal? Are they walking through the park observing what they're seeing in nature? Then you'll read it in more of a calm manner and soothing. But do they have to go to the bathroom before their bladder bursts because they really have to pee? Then there's going to be some urgency to the story. How old are they? Because a young kid sounds very different from an old man. How big are they? Would they need to look up because they're very small or down because they're very large? Are they an anthropomorphized animal? Because what does the animal look like in real life? How do they sound? How do they move? And what are they feeling? Is there a buildup of tension? Or like also how do they express themselves? And then their personality. Are they shy and introverted, friendly and extroverted, evil and incarnate? These are things to consider. Next up is voice. And this one is very important because it helps you distinguish between the characters and bring them to life. So I'm going to encourage you all to experiment with different funny voices. You don't have to be serious. It doesn't have to be perfect. And observe what's happening. What are you physically feeling? Where and how is the air flowing? Which muscles are engaged? And what are these muscles doing? And the body parts to focus on are the mouth, nose, throat, chest, and belly. So you want to practice replicating what you observed and then mix and match to create new and interesting voices. I also included a link here you can check out later on how the human body produces voice and speech. It's really interesting. It looks at it from a physiological level. So in case you want to, nerd out a little bit extra. Next up is facial expression. Now, Chelsea complained to me saying this face is horrifying, but I think it fits very well. So your facial expression actually affects the tone in your voice. I used to work at a call center. I would interrupt people's dinners and ask them if they wanted to complete a survey. So everyone hated me. And it was a very depressing place to work. But I was told, when you're on the phone, smile, because you can actually hear it in your voice. So I want you to all experiment, because you're all muted right now, saying, I'm chewing bubblegum in 3 expressions. First, neutral. I'm chewing bubblegum. Happy. I'm chewing bubblegum. Angry. I'm chewing bubblegum. Even psychologically, it makes you kind of add the more emotions to it. So don't be afraid to make your face look weird with all different types of expressions. Like one of my hobbies is looking in the mirror and making funny faces. And then remember your character study. Should you be expressing extreme emotions or more subtle? Is there buildup? What characteristics do you want to show on your face? Next up, body movement. First things first, leave your ego at the door. We all have a picture of ourselves reading a story, looking serene, the children gathered around. We look like fairy princesses or princes or, whatever. That's not going to happen. You are not going to look classy. Perfect posture is nice, but it's not good for story time. But also, take steps to, stretch afterwards and do that. But the biggest compliment I ever got from a student was, you're crazy after a story time. So your body is telling the story. It's not just your head and your voice, it's your whole body. Your legs and feet are stomping, tapping, running, flailing, creeping. Your arms and hands are stabbing, waving, pointing, plucking, scooping. Your core is sinking, stretching, inflatable tube manning. Like, you should be barely on your chair sometimes. And you should also establish a kicking zone. Because I warn students, you've seen me during story time. You know my legs fail. You can't sit too close. So at the beginning, I usually go, okay, time to back up. Beep, beep, beep. Which they find the humor in, as do I. So yeah, move your body. And also, it's pretty good, get active. Props. So I'm a fan of puppets and dolls, but they can be kind of limiting because you can only use them for certain stories, and also they're a bit pricey. So you can expand upon that. I once made a fake fire in my library out of tissue paper and cardboard, and some fairy lights I had from home. I did this for doing oral storytelling with the students where I told them a ghost story. And my all-time favorite is using household items. So for the oral storytelling, I used a flashlight and lantern. So I turned off all the lights in the library. When the students came in, I gave the first one a lantern to carry, and I used a flashlight to guide them to the storytelling area. And it was also a really bad storm that day, so it sounded extra spooky. An umbrella I used to talk about silly, serious, and in-between roles, where I opened an umbrella inside the library and asked them, what kind of role do you think this is? Because at first it's a superstition, so it must be silly. But then again, I can knock the umbrella over things, poke an eye out. So it's a great prop to grab their attention. And cutlery, if you're doing something like the book Spork, it could be great if you actually had a spork. And I once tried bringing in a sourdough starter to go with the book Bread Pet, but unfortunately it died. Yeah, so that was a failure. But if any of you can know how to make a sourdough starter that won't die, you might want to bring one to school because it's really cool. Next up is costume. You can do good old-fashioned drag. This is me dressed up as Weird Al Yankovic. A shawl could be very flexible to use. It could be a hood, it could be a mask, it could be a wing. Oops, sorry, it disappeared in the background. But you can do a lot of that. And use what's in your wardrobe already. So you don't have to go all out with your costumes. Try to dress up in a way to match the theme and setting of your story. Consider the time of year. So if you want to warm up, read a beach story and maybe dress up in your beach clothes. And the last one is labels. So when I do the story Red, a crayon story, I put labels on myself. And these labels are the ones I had when I was a kid. And one of them is reluctant reader. And I actually had a lot of trouble learning how to read. So I talked about that with the students, and then I'd show them, like, with a lot of hard work, you can remove labels and replace them with new labels. Sometimes people will put labels on you, like weird, and you can decide what labels you have. So it's a really great activity, and it really, reaches out to the reluctant readers or kids who have trouble reading. So yeah, get creative, and you don't have to go to a costume shop. You can just use what you have around you. So last of all, be prepared to make mistakes. You will choose a terrible book, pronounce words wrong, jumble words, struggle to turn to the next page, get blank stares from students, lose control during the interactive portion, have inconsistent character voices, zone out during your 10th reading. Oh boy, yep, that's happens to me often. And mess up in new and interesting ways. All I have to say is keep on trucking. So that is it for my Storytime animation presentation. Thank you for all staying muted. So now we're going to go into a 5-minute break, and then Chelsea is going to take it away with her presentation on her Storytime picks. So have a great day, and I'll see you in 5 minutes.
Welcome back, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the movie. Thanks, Joan, for putting it together. Hi, my name's Chelsea Baker, and I'm the librarian at the Central Quebec School Board in Quebec City. Today, I'm going to share some of my favorite Storytime titles. Between the years of 2008 and 2022, I worked at the library at St. Foy Elementary School. So every title you see has been used in front of a live captive audience, all except one title that is brand new and I can't wait to try it out. All of the titles are also still available to purchase. I want to note that most of the students at St. Foy Elementary come from French-speaking homes, so I think they really appreciate it, hearing a fluent English speaker read a book out loud. So let's get started with my criteria. Criteria for a great read aloud. So all of my titles fall into one of these categories. I want rich and engaging text, compelling characters, appealing illustrations, plot twists and surprise endings, an emotional response, or I really like an unreliable narrator. I bet you have more criteria that we could add, but for time's sake, I'll be sticking to these 6. So let's start with rich and engaging text. One of my favorites for the little kids is Mike Toohey's book, Oops, Pounce, Quick Run, An Alphabet Caper. It was published in 2016, and it really is for kindergartens, the 4 and 5-year-old. I really love, I'm just going to advance. I really love using sticky notes in this book. I cover the word, and the action words are really fun. The kids like to guess what's under the sticky note. I don't put a sticky note on every page. They pop up here and there, and it's a nice surprise as we read along. Other Mike Toohey books that I find really fun to read aloud for the little ones, Stop, Go, Yes, No, A Story of Opposites. And it's really fun to continue the opposite game after you're finished reading it for a little challenge. And also Spacebot. Spacebot has a good twist at the end, and the rhyming text makes it really engaging and fun. Rich and engaging text continued for the older students. When the Moon Comes by Paul Harbridge, illustrated by Matt James, both Canadian. This book won a Governor General Award when it came out in 2017. And I read this out loud to grades 3 to 6. There is a profile on this book on the Constellations website. I don't know if you've used the Constellations website before, but it has some really good discussion points on several titles. So I recommend checking it out. One passage, if you've never read this book before, it's about a group of boys who go out into the woods to play hockey on the frozen beaver pond. And on their way home, there's a passage here that I really like that I find has a lot of imagery in the words. Our wet pants freeze solid in the cold, and we walk clanking like knights in armor, lances over our shoulders, hoods like helmets around our faces. And sometimes the kids get that the lance is their hockey stick over their shoulder. Most of the time they get it, but I just like that imagery. Sticking with the hockey theme and going into compelling characters, I really love this one. That's Not Hockey by Andre Poulain, illustrated by Felix Girard. It came out in 2020, and I read this to grades 1 to 3. It's the story of Jack Plante, the first NHL goalie to wear a face mask, and I love the voice of the coach and the roaring crowd. When I read this book, I usually have a picture of the real Jacques Plante on my iPad, and I would do an introduction to the book. Like, today we're going to read about Jacques Plante, the first hockey goalie to wear a face mask during a game back in 1959. What do you think the reaction to his mask was like? And this picture always brings audible gasps. And after reading, we usually have a very good discussion on what does it mean to feel safe when we play our favorite sports. Other compelling characters, The Man Who Walked Between the Towers is the story of Philippe Petit, the French tightrope walker, who walked between the Twin Towers. I think it was in the 1970s. I actually got to meet him and Mordecai Gernstein a long time ago when the book first came out. I went to a reading, and he's so small, a little acrobat. And he was a really, really compelling character to meet in person, as he is in this book. And there was a really good movie about him as well, and this feat. Extra Yarn by Mac Barnett and illustrated by John Clausen. I love Annabelle, all the villagers, and that evil Archduke in Extra Yarn. I find the kids really like this reading out loud too, and there's critical thinking in the end about what does that yarn represent. Appealing illustrations. One of my favorites is Shortcut by Donald Cruz. It's an oldie but a goodie, published back in 1996. And I read this one to grades 1 and 2. Take a look at this cover. I mean, it's kids on a train track. Is this a good idea? It says here, we looked, we listened, we decided to take the shortcut home. The setting and the tone of the art really draws in the listener, and the dilemma is clear. Should they take the train tracks to go home? And at the end, after reading, so many children want to share a time when they've taken a shortcut or when they think they've been in danger. They talk about the characters. It's very good, and especially the artwork in this one. Appealing illustrations continued. Another really old classic witch story here, Hecate Peg by Audrey and Don Wood, published way back in 1987. I love reading this one out loud to grades 1 to 4 because there's a fantastic witch voice, and the mother's voice too is very good. Here's a passage. It says, the mother kissed her children goodbye and said, now be careful and remember, don't let a stranger in and don't touch fire. Can guess what happens? They let the witch in and they light her pipe with fire from the fireplace. The mother uses her courage and wit to solve a riddle and rescue her children. It is read aloud gold. Other appealing illustration duos. Sometimes if you have a little more time to read more than one story, I like putting them in duos. And here's my classic opposites, Hot and Cold, Hot Dog and Blizzard. Hot Dog is by Doug Slatty. That's more recent, and it won a Caldecott Award. John Rocco has lots of really good natural disaster type books for the little ones. So Blizzard is a really good story. It has fold out pages. If you when you have time to do more than one book, you could also pair like a fiction or a nonfiction, or you could do dynamic duo author illustrators, like in Extra Yarn, Mac Barnett and John Clausen. They do a lot together and they're awesome. Plot twists. and Surprise Endings, The Sweetest Fig by Chris Van Allsburg, published way back in 1993. I love reading this to grades 3 to 4. And for reading comprehension, this title is very effective. To see the look on their faces at the end. I'm sure a lot of you know this book, but you got to think about the story to understand what happened, and it's very hard-hitting. Other books with great twists at the end, and I'm happy to see some of them in the video that just played. Most of these are for the younger kids, but the monster at the end of this book, Bark George, I'm Going to Build a Snowman, Sam and Dave Dig a Hole, and Life on Mars by John Agee. The I'm Going to Build a Snowman, this one, I can't read the author's name. I think it's I'm sorry, it's too small for me there, and I'm forgetting. But it's a great book about mindset, and for the winter months, building a snowman, imagining what that snowman's going to look like, and when it doesn't turn out the way you thought it would, it's a really good book. Emotional response. Joy in the library can also mean experiencing emotional responses that are not laughter. How about a book that makes you shed a little tear? Has it ever happened to you? It has to me, especially about be careful with the books about where a pet dies. Oh my goodness. Yeah, read those ones first and make sure you plan it because you need Kleenex nearby. But this is a beautiful one to read out loud in November. The 11th hour, and I saw that one in the video too. I'm happy that somebody else really loves this book. Emotional response also for Big by Vashti Harrison. This book just won the Caldecott last year, and I find so much rich discussion comes out of this. The tone and the emotions and the use of color. The moment that the young girl gives back the words that hurt her feelings, there is a strong message of courage and self-love there that I think is really beautiful. And finally, Reliable Narrator, The Bear That Ate Your Sandwich by Julia Sarcone-Roach, published in 2015 for grades 1 to 3. The narrator's job is to tell the story, but what if they can't be trusted? This book has a great surprise ending, fantastic illustrations, and keeps the readers hooked. It's just fun to read out loud. Another unreliable narrator is Little Regina. Regina is not a little dinosaur by Andrea Zwill. Came out in 2021 for kindergarten grade 1. If you need a good dinosaur story, this is it. Young students will identify with this little dinosaur who wants to be big and tough, but who also needs her mama and is very afraid of bees. Really cute illustrations too. This is the new one I was talking about. I just read it last week. I'm so tickled with it. I think it's really funny. I'm going to try this out in January, so I need to perfect the voices of the characters. There's a farmer and his wife and the aliens, and these extraterrestrials are trying to convince everyone that they're from Europe and that their car is broken. And I'd say they're very convincing. But what it is a book all about what it means to be kind and accepting to people who just need help or humans that need help. The author is X Fang. It came out in August, and I'm going to try it with everyone that I can. I bet a lot of you know this one if you're looking for an interactive read. I've never had a teacher turn me down to sit down and read Duck Rabbit by Amy Krauss Rosenthal, illustrated by Tom Lichtenheld, 2014, kindergarten to grade 3. It's about perspectives, and it's a great book to read with someone. If you only have a few minutes, how about read some interactive poetry or just a poem in general? This one I did in a performance at a school assembly for Poetry Month. I performed the poem, There Was an Old Woman Who Lived in a Chew, with a willing teacher, and we brought the house down. It was really fun. So if you have a performer side, I recommend anything by Chris Harris, illustrated by Lane Smith. They have another book out together of poetry, or just find a poem you like and share it. Thank you so much. I went a little bit over my time. I am going to pass it on now to Jennifer Davies, Western Quebec School Board.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I am Jennifer Davies, and I am with Western Quebec School Board. We operate very differently than most of the other school boards. We don't have doc techs in our schools, and our schools also don't have librarians except for our 3 largest high schools, which have us part-time, the 3 librarians in our board part-time. So we're traveling librarians for the most part. I spend at least 2 days a week on the road visiting schools in the area. I have 12 that I am responsible for, and the furthest ones away are 3 hours, 5.5 hours, and 7.5 hours in the Abitibi to Miskamang region. So when I'm traveling, I'm up at those schools for a week. I go up on a Monday, come back down, do a whole cycle, and then we come back down on Monday. So as a traveling librarian, I look at things very differently than someone who is based in a school who has classes coming to them, because I have to carry everything with me when I'm going. And I have usually a big load. So if I can only have one book that covers a lot of grades, that's absolutely fantastic. Literally, I want to lessen my load as much as possible. And same thing with going in just to a K-6 school in the region and in the area. It's just easier if I can have one book or 2, in the class time that I have. And the class time that I have could vary. I could be in a class for a whole 15-minute period. I could have half an hour. I could have 20 minutes. And literally, I am just running from like classroom to classroom. Very rarely am I getting into a class coming into the library to see me. So I'm very different than how a lot of people operate, but I really like it because it's very different, and then it gives me the opportunity to see a lot of different students. So I'm not seeing the same thing day after day. So I really do like that. When I pick a book, I select something that wants to keep the students engaged and keeps everyone interested, from the shy little guy who's clinging to the teacher's leg or to the little girl who's just bouncing in the corner. I need something that's going to keep everybody involved. Humor almost always works. Kids always like humor. And I want books that aren't necessarily common, that aren't like the Robert Munch or the books that the teachers have in their classrooms. I want to be something new that the students haven't seen before, and that they're going to remember. And because I really don't like, oh, we've read that, the old eye roll and the sigh. And so if I can bring in something they've never seen, which is great. So I'll do a book for a school year, and this is my year, and then it gets put on my shelf and I don't pull it out again for maybe 5-6 years. So it's, even if it's something that I will keep it away. So it won't be seen by the same kids year after year. It's like, put it away and then we'll bring it out in a few years. I choose books that I like and that I think kids will like. It may not be the book with the most literary merit, or it may not be an award winner, but how the audience is going to react to it. If I think it's funny, I think most kids are going to find it funny. I also take into account school holidays, what's kind of the seasons, what's going on, teacher requests. I have teachers make requests of what they're doing in their classroom at the time. They could be studying a unit on dinosaurs, or they're going to be doing space. And so I kind of take that into request. Sometimes it's hard because I am based in a high school library where my office is. I don't have a huge collection. I'm adding to it all the time. Each year I kind of take a theme and I focus on that and building up my collection. So I'm getting there, and I use my public library a lot. I am a great user of the public library in order to get books that are going to meet the teacher's needs. My main goal as the traveling librarian is to show kids that reading is fun and that books don't have to be boring. It is something that it's enjoyable, and if they learn something at the same time, that's great. But in the end, it's all about finding joy in the library. So I want them to do that and to remember what they've read. I was in a school on Monday, and the last time I was there was just before Remembrance Day, and I walked into a kindergarten class, and the little guy who was just bouncing said, "You read that book," and he named the title. He knew it, and all the classes I went to remembered. And I love that, because I've made an impact on my one day every 6 weeks that I get into their classrooms. And so now I'm going to show one of my favorite books to do, and literally kindergarten right through to grade 6. It has all kinds of different things going on with it. There's so many cross-curricular activities that can be done. And I'm going to share my screen and cross my fingers that technology works. Carson Crosses Canada by Linda Bailey. This is a book that was published in 2017 for Canada's 150th. It features a little dog, Carson, and his person, Annie. They're on a cross-Canada trip from Tofino, British Columbia to Witless Bay, Newfoundland. It's suitable for all elementary grades. I've even done it into secondary cycle 1, so grade 7 and 8s. And I could do it with grade 11s. I know I could. It promotes a lot of discussion. A lot of cross-curricular activities can be done as well. So the introduction of Carson and Annie. So I'm always showing the cover of the book first. I name the author and the illustrator, ask what they do. Like, what does the author do? You know, they write the words and the illustrator draws the pictures. I tell the students the book is about Carson's trip across Canada. And then I ask, by looking at the picture, who do we think Carson is? So then they're guessing, is it the person driving? They often think it's an old man, but the old lady or the dog, and who is it? And then we point out the things on top of the car and we wonder what they're for. You know, they're going camping, they're moving, they're going to the beach. And so we're going to find out when we open up the book. The end papers of the book have the cross-Canada map of their trip. So then I always point out the starting point. So this is Tofino, British Columbia. Depending on the grade, we'll ask what province that is. You know, by looking at it, what province is on the far west coast? Or I'll say, what coast is this? What direction? And then point out the end of the trip. And then we'll get to all the way across the country, going to all these stops. We're going to end up over there. What province is that? You know, where are we going to get to? And then as the story goes on, and each stop that they make, I flip back to the end papers and say, this is where they were. This is where they've stopped. This is the point number, whatever. Here's Annie and Carson's routes. So sometimes, if it works out well, I do have a physical paper copy of this. If the teacher has one of those document readers that I can project it on the screen, they'll put it up on the screen. Don't have to flip back and forth then. Or if I've coordinated with the teacher really well in advance, I will have sent them this and they can put it up on the smartboard. So the first dot on the map after they leave Tofino is Cathedral Grove on Vancouver Island. And so, you know, the kids we've gone along. This is their first stop where the giant trees are. And we've discovered that they're on a cross Canada trip. It's not a camping, and they're camping, but they always look on, I don't know if you guys can see this really well, but on the kind of the bottom left corner, there's it looks like 2 little eyes. It looks like a little monster. And then they look for that monster throughout the rest of the book. It's not there, but they look because they can notice those things. And they travel across the West. So they go to the Rockies and then they keep going. They go through each province and they go to Lake Superior. They hit the East. They go to Niagara Falls and they go to the Ville de Quebec. And so at each stop, each place that they are, they don't necessarily name where they are. They don't name the fact that they're in Saskatchewan. They didn't name that they were in Manitoba, but they were in Lake Winnipeg. Same with Niagara Falls or Lake Superior. They don't name that. They're just after days of rocks and trees. And then they go to Niagara Falls, which is named. Ville de Quebec, again, not named. And then finally, they go through the rest of the provinces in the east, and they end in Witless Bay, Newfoundland, where Annie sees her sister and her sister Elsie, and Carson finally gets his surprise, because that's kind of like the whole thing. Is Carson going to get a surprise here? Is Carson getting his surprise here? We're guessing, what is Carson's surprise? What's he going to be getting at the end of their vacation? Discussion with the class. Again, depending on the room depends on what I do. But how long do you think it would take to cross Canada? And you can get some like crazy hours. It can be from, one day, a whole year. They're like this whole range of time. And then we're trying to figure out like exactly how long would they take, with or without stops, because she made a lot of stops. So would it be faster without stopping? Was their route the best or the fastest one? If they wanted to get from Tofino to Witless Bay right away, they probably wouldn't have gone down to Niagara Falls. That was a stop they wouldn't have to make, because that was kind of out of their way if you're looking at the actual roadmap. What are other ways of traveling across Canada? What other transportation can you use? Which is incidentally how I found the book. I had a kindergarten class saying, we're doing transportation. What can you get me? And I found this at my public library. And I'm like, okay, this is great. And so what other ways of traveling? Trains, airplanes, motorcycle, bicycles, horseback, feet. In some classes, we end up in this whole discussion about Terry Fox. And we learn about Terry Fox and remember how he ran across Canada. And so it kind of tying into what they've already learned in other classes. What are other places in Canada Annie and Carson could see on their way home? So where did they not visit? They didn't go to Montreal. They didn't go to Toronto. They didn't hit up, say, something in Calgary, or the way home, they could see different things. What would you pack in your suitcase to cross Canada? That talks about Carson didn't have a suitcase. I mean, he's a dog, but his squeaky chicken went in. But Annie had packed bologna sandwiches and she packed all kinds of other things. But what would you put in your suitcase, if you were going? And where have you traveled in Canada? Most kids, I find a lot of kids, oh, Niagara Falls, I've been there. But people haven't been to other spots in Canada. Some do, like, oh, I went to Newfoundland last summer, or I went to Prince Edward Island. And so a lot of people have, and so kids will share where they have been. If there's more time, have a class write about their trip across Canada, what transportation, where they started, what they saw. Write a letter to the author, Linda Bailey, requesting a follow-up book with Carson and Annie's trip back to British Columbia, because it just ends with them in Newfoundland. And I read an interview with her in Quill and Choir, and she said, no, Carson and Annie's story's done. They've accomplished what they need to accomplish. And I'm like, no, they haven't. They have to get home. So I want her to do that. And so I've had a class start writing letters. I had to leave. The teacher goes, no, we're going to finish this, or I'm going to mail them. Again, because I'm in a classroom and then I don't go back again, I don't know how that ever turned out for them. Write their own story for Annie and Carson's return home, so they can create Annie and Carson's travel back. Name the provinces and capitals. Provide maps. I have maps that I have with the little 1 to 10, so you can name all the provinces. List what goes in a suitcase, so write it down, what you would put in your suitcase. Math questions. So if the car holds 60 liters of gas and gas is $1.50 a liter, how much to fill the tank? If you drive 10 days over 7 days, how many hours are they driving? So we can turn it into a math lesson. And draw your favorite scene from the book. Write 2 or 3 sentences why you picked it. So, maybe for a younger grade, we could do that. And I have done all of these things with classes. There's my map, so you can label your map of the provinces and territories. And that's something we discussed too. They didn't go to the territories. They didn't travel up the north. And sometimes the teacher can really enhance your lesson or your story time, because I had a teacher who did a trip across Canada. He was backpacking. It took him, he said, 4 months. When he graduated university, he just backpacked, and then he told the kids where he went and how he did it. And he was up the one, and up, and then he'd come back down, and it was all over. So it was great, because then we did not plan it, but we totally tag teamed, and it worked out really well. And there are my sources. So that is how I pick a book, how I do Carson Crosses Canada, and all the activities that I could do with it. And thank you very much. And I am going to turn this over to Erin Miller.
Thanks so much, Jen. And thank you to all our presenters and everyone on the QSLiN Planning Committee. If you're running tech, if you made a video, it's a team effort, folks, and it's all appreciated. Thank you so much. Big thank you to all our presenters today. And there's one more. I understand someone took us up on the offer to share a favorite or two. So do we have, I see a lot of cameras off, but do we have Joy from Central Quebec School Board? Are you here and are you ready to go? I don't see Joy. Okay, I mean, this is what we run into sometimes in the middle of the day.
She is on the list of people who are in attendance, but
she is.
Maybe she is unable to turn on her camera.
Yeah, there might be some technical difficulties. Okay. Well, what we'll do in the meantime, Joy, feel free to interrupt me anytime. I grabbed a couple of my favorites. I'll share those. If you get working in the next minute or so, feel free to jump in, okay? So this one is one of my favorites. Oh, this stupid background. There we go. Nanette's Baguette. For those of you who are fans of Mo Willems, some of us enjoy our Elephant and Piggy books. Some of us enjoy that pigeon, that pesky pigeon. This one here, Nanette's Baguette. This one I don't recommend doing first thing in the morning unless you're really ready to go and your mouth is well warmed up. It's told entirely in rhyme. It's a lot of fun. And if anyone has ever tried to go to a bakery and get a fresh, warm baguette without eating any before you get home, you'll understand the conflict of this particular book. Another one that I love that I found actually because a teacher asked for a picture book with speech bubbles so that their class was starting to learn about speech bubbles and being able to tell in text who's talking and when they're talking. And this is a book by Ryan T. Higgins. It's hilarious. The main guy here who's yelling, "Be quiet," is trying to write a wordless picture book. And these two chatty Cathys want to help him, but they keep talking through the entire book. And it's a lot of fun. The illustrations are quite rich. There's a lot to see and a lot to look at. And again, those speech bubbles pointing us to who is speaking and when. So like Jen said, when a teacher has a specific request, you can find some real Storytime gold. So I had it for that one class and I've kept it in my collection to bring with me from time to time. This one, let me just keep an eye on the chat in case we're ready to go. Okay. This one, 3 Billy Goats Gruff. So I think it was Chelsea who mentioned the dynamic duo of Mac Barnett and John Clausen. I swear everything they do together is gold. This is, I think we all know the original story of the 3 Billy Goats Gruff. It's hundreds of years old, and yet they have managed to make their telling of this story something that kids have asked me for over and over again. And if you are someone who likes to play with voices, this is a very good one. The troll is a really interesting character. They have him scooping goop out of his belly button one moment and then speaking in rhyming couplets the next. So it's a real adventure. The fun thing about this one, if you're not super comfortable doing voices, you could just work with volume, right? Because you're looking at 3 different sizes of goat and, one rhyming troll. So it's a lot of fun. And finally, of the pile I had close by, this one is a bit of a longer book. So this is definitely one for if you have, I would say, a good 25 minutes with a class. It is called Khadija and the Elephant Toothpaste Experiment. It's by Canadian authors. And it's for, I mean, if you have a request for a STEM book, this is fantastic. If you're looking for more diversity, this is also fantastic. There is more text, so this is definitely one that you'd want to make sure there's time for. But it tells the story of this little girl who desperately wants to be a scientist, and she sees the elephant toothpaste experiment, which if you have never seen it, it's a reaction that takes a small amount of goop and it makes an explosive large amount of goop. And it's a lot of fun for students who are just learning about science. She sees this, she's enamored, she's hooked, she wants to be a scientist. And in the end, it turns out to be a happy story. So those are some of my favorites that I had close at hand. Joy, how are we doing? Can we get your technology to cooperate with you?
Okay, so is there a book that you would like me to read first, or just whatever?
I think from my notes, you had a couple books that you wanted to share. You've probably got 2 or 3 minutes. So you go ahead and oh, look at those. Perfect.
Okay.
You choose what you'd like to do.
Okay. Well, one of the speakers was talking about Robert Munsch is maybe overused. I love Robert Munsch books because he always has a catchphrase that gets repeated, and I make it interactive by saying to the students, when I point to you like this, then you say, Andrew, pull the plug. Okay, so, but maybe this one is less known. How many of you have already read this book? It's a little bit old. Okay, I'm going to do this one because it really engages the students, especially those who are a little nervous about Halloween. And yeah, it's called Annie Was Warned, and it was written by Jared Krzoska, who also did the pictures. So what's going on here? What's Annie doing? Okay, normally that people, feel free to unmute your mics because I want you to interact as if you were kids. Okay, so what's Annie doing?
She's going down the stairs.
She's going downstairs. Why do you think she's going down the stairs? Is she supposed to go out?
No, it's nighttime.
Okay. So on Halloween night, Annie sneaked out to the creepy old Montgomery mansion. And we have a teacher whose last name is Montgomery, and I love teasing her that we're going to Miss Jenna's house. Okay. Annie's parents told her not to go. It's got bats, they warned. Bats don't scare me, said Annie. Annie's sister warned her not to go. It's got spiders. I like spiders, said Annie. Okay. Annie's friend James nodded. That place is haunted, all right. You should definitely go. Annie was warned. What do we see here? And these are kindergarten kids that are just learning English. So if I catch them at the right time, they just learned some Halloween vocabulary, so they'll know the word ghosts. If not, then I use this as an occasion to teach them some vocabulary like that. Okay, are these real ghosts? Some kids think maybe, some kids think no. So I turn the page and we see they're just kids dressed up as ghosts. So Annie was warned, but she wasn't scared. Now this is a little bit long, so I just resume. She went down the street to the creepy Montgomery mansion. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw something black. Was it a bat? Okay, and then I point out the shadow here. No, it was just a cat licking its paws. And he turned the corner and crept past the churchyard. Something brushed her neck. Was it a spider? Ooh. Annie spun around. It was just a leaf that had blown off a tree. Okay. Then the house loomed large in the night. Was it haunted? What do you think? And of course, the kids are too little to read, so I explained to them these signs say, keep out, danger, do not go any further away. Oh, should she go back home? And usually about a third of the kids say, yeah, she should go back home. Okay. But, oh, Annie was warned, but she didn't listen. Now she's at the door. Should we open the door? And again, about half and half will want to open the door or not. This year, I read it to a group and almost everybody said, no, no, no. And I'm like, oh, well, if we don't open the door, then she'll just go home and that'll be the end of the story. So then they had to rethink. Are you sure we should open the door? And I really play it up big. Okay. Oh, no one's there. Oh, wait. I think I hear something. Great surprise! It was a combination Halloween birthday party for Annie. I'm sorry, I'm trying to stay in the time limit here, and I forgot to read the part where you find out that Halloween is also her birthday. So then I use these pictures to teach words like skeleton, mummy, vampire, words like that. And then it was the best scare Annie had ever had. So.
That is absolutely delightful. I am absolutely getting that from my collection.
Unfortunately, I think it's out of print. But because it's a book that I can act out and I can really play with the kids. Are you sure you want me to go to the next page? Then I decided to suggest that for my reading.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Joy. Much appreciated.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Yes, no, I think it was Jen that mentioned that sometimes it's really useful to pop out to your local public library and see what you can find there, right? Because then you can find some of those older treasures that we can't necessarily get through our accredited bookstores anymore if they are out of print. All right, my dear. So we have technically 1 minute left, just a little bit left in terms of housekeeping. Another big thank you to the presenters and technicians, everyone who contributed to the day. Thank you so, so much. We're really pleased that you could make it today. This is, as you all know, an entirely new format for QSLiN's professional development. And as they say, necessity is the mother of invention. And I think that I've had a lot of fun today. I really enjoy this. And I thank you for jumping in with us to try something new. Their takeaways were mentioned, and there's a lot that you get to have. So tools in your toolkit, they will be available on the QSLiN website. So we have the picture book list. So Joan's wonderful video, that's a co-created list of picture book favorites that we'll make available to you. There's a handout on Storytime resources and some information on dialogic reading, which is the technical term for what a lot of our presenters talked about today, which is that interaction with students while we're reading. The session, of course, is being recorded and it will be posted and more. We really hope that those takeaways will be useful to you as you plan your read aloud and have some story time fun. I think a big takeaway from today for me is that story time really is kind of this almost magical mixture of a little bit of fearlessness, a little bit of playfulness, planning, a little bit of improv, and it all just works to create so many ways to take books off the page and really make a moment that students will remember, and that hopefully you will remember too, because I got to tell you, there's times, yes, it can be a little bit of a challenge when a class is getting too involved, but man, oh man, those little ones come up with some of the best jokes I've ever heard. They come up with some of the best observations. I've gotten some of the most wonderful, joyful laughs I've ever had when I'm reading books to children. So take those resources and enjoy. And now we have a little surprise for you. Jen's book was Carson Crosses Canada, and we happen to have a copy that we're going to give away. We're going to give it away a little bit differently, though, as a bit of a segue into our next session. So we have a total of 6 school boards here today. And of course, I'm looking at the numbers. We may run into a bit of a snag there, Julian. You might have to roll more than once. What I've done is I've taken the 6 school boards in attendance and I've assigned you each a number. Central Quebec School Board, you're number 4. Lester B. Pearson, you're number 3. QAIS, you're number 1. Riverside, you're number 2. Sir Wilfrid Laurier, you're number 6. English Montreal, you are number 5. What we're going to do is we're going to take a fancy dice and we're going to roll to find out the winning school board. Julian, can you please roll for initiative?
All right. So you said that first 6-sided dice?
D6, please. Yes.
All right. So 1.
Number 1. So the winning school board is QAIS. So now, those of you who are attending from QAIS, I have given you a number. If you're not all here, we may need to roll again. But Julian, with a D8, can you roll for our winner, please?
7.
Number 7. Is Dora Zani in attendance with us today? I think I saw her earlier. There you are. Congratulations, Dora. You are our winner of Carson Crosses Canada. So we will find a way. We will find a way to get that over to you. Wonderful. So you might be wondering what's up with the dice. It's a nice segue into our next session, which is stories and storytelling in the high school library. Those dice are, of course, from the popular tabletop role-playing game Dungeons and Dragons, which is a wonderful way for students to enjoy stories and storytelling in an older library setting. So we wanted to have some fun with that. That's it for our session today. Thank you all so much. Let me just tell you the date. That date for this session will focus on our older students and how we can engage with them through stories and storytelling. Will be on Thursday, March 20th, 2025. This one will be in the morning at 10 o'clock to 11:15. We're so looking forward to seeing you then. That's it for this session. Hang in there, everyone. Winter break is right around the corner. However you celebrate this season, we really hope it's full of rest and laughter and love and light. We'll see you in 2025.